The door to Rusty's Roadhouse bar swung open with a long, slow creak. It was late evening, the kind of hour when the air inside smelled of gasoline, whiskey, and too many untold stories. A tall man stepped in, his black leather jacket shining faintly under the yellow lights. His hair was slicked back, his expression unreadable. He moved with a quiet confidence that immediately drew attention. That man was Steven Seagal, though most of the people in the bar didn't realize it yet. He walked slowly toward the counter, nodding once to the bartender, and ordered something that made a few heads turn. "Green tea," he said calmly. A few bikers snorted. "Tea? In a place like this?" one muttered. Seagal didn't react. He simply stood there waiting for his drink, calm as a monk in a storm. But that calm, it irritated Jake Ironjaw Miller, the biggest, loudest guy in the bar. Jake was the type who needed to prove he was the alpha wherever he went. And tonight, Steven's silence felt like a challenge. Jake rose from his stool, his leather vest creaking as he turned. "Hey, tough guy," he said, voice dripping with sarcasm. "You lost, or you think this is some kind of movie set?" Seagal didn't even look his way. "Just getting a drink," he replied softly. That answer made the crowd chuckle. Jake's grin widened, and the kind that meant trouble. "That's so," he said, walking closer until he was only inches away. "Funny jacket you got there." Seagal remained still. The bartender froze mid-motion. Everyone in the room knew Jake loved to pick fights. Jake leaned in and, with a grin, grabbed a handful of Steven's jacket near the collar. "Let's see what kind of man hides behind leather." The room went dead silent. The laughter stopped. The air felt heavier, tighter. "And Steven Seagal?" Still didn't move. His eyes lifted, cold and sharp, like a blade being unsheathed. In that instant, every instinct in the bar screamed. Something was about to happen. But what Jake saw next froze the entire bar. For a long, tense second, nobody breathed. Jake's thick fingers were still gripping the front of Steven Seagal's jacket, but something in the air had shifted. The bartender's eyes darted between them nervously. He knew who that man was, what the Steven Seagal. Martial artist, actor, former lawman. But Jake didn't. Not yet. Seagal's calm, unflinching gaze made Jake hesitate just for a moment. Then his pride kicked in. "What's the matter, old man?" Jake sneered, yanking the jacket again. "Too scared to say something?" Steven's voice came out quiet, almost too quiet, yet it carried through the room. "Son, fear's not my problem, but you might be about to make one for yourself." A ripple of laughter came from one of the tables. Jake's buddies, 6 of them, all wearing matching vests, started hooting. "Come on, Ironjaw, show him how we welcome tourists," one yelled. Jake grinned. The crowd's laughter gave him courage. "Don't talk big, Grandpa," he said. "This ain't Hollywood. Around here, we don't play hero." Steven didn't flinch. "Then maybe you should stop pretending to be villains." That line landed like a hammer. A few bikers whistled. The bartender froze mid-polish, eyes wide. Jake's grin slipped, but he forced a laugh to cover it. "Oh, I see," Jake said, pacing around him. "You one of those Zen types, huh? Think you're above it all?" Seagal turned slightly, just enough to face him squarely. "I think real strength doesn't need to prove itself." The quiet conviction in his tone made even the jukebox stop feeling loud. People started whispering now. "Who is this guy?" "He's too calm. He's gonna get knocked out." Jake slammed his hand on the counter. "You think you're better than us?" Seagal just looked at him, unblinking. "No, but I think you're trying too hard to prove you are." That answer hit harder than any punch could. Jake's nostrils flared. The crowd went silent again. The bartender leaned forward, whispering nervously, "Jake, you might want to back off. That's Steven Seagal." Jake laughed so hard the sound broke the tension for a moment. "Steven Seagal, that guy? Man, that's just a movie star. Ain't no way this old dude can fight." A few of the older patrons exchanged uneasy looks. They'd seen the calm, cold stare of real fighters before, and that's exactly what Steven had. Seagal turned slightly, one hand still on the bar, the other relaxed at his side. His movements were slow, deliberate, like a man in control of everything around him. Jake took another step forward, his boots echoing against the wooden floor. "Come on then," he said, puffing out his chest. "Show me what you got." Steven sighed quietly. "You don't want that?" "Oh, I think I do." Jake grinned, glancing at his friends for support. They laughed and shouted, "Get him, Ironjaw!" The tension rose like a storm cloud. Even the people in the back started standing up, phones coming out of pockets. Everyone could feel something was about to explode. The bartender muttered under his breath, "Here we go." Jake shoved Steven's shoulder hard. The drink on the bar rattled. Still, no reaction, no anger. Just that same stillness that somehow made Jake even angrier. "What's wrong?" Jake shouted. "Don't you fight, movie star?" Steven looked at him, his eyes steady as stone. "I fight when I need to," he said. "Not to entertain people who don't know what respect means." That one word, respect, cut through Jake's ego like a blade. For the first time he hesitated, but before he could speak, one of the bikers behind him jeered, "He's scared, man. Look at him." Jake couldn't back down now. His pride was chained to the crowd's laughter. So he reached forward again, this time gripping the collar tighter, knuckles white. The bartender whispered to no one in particular, "He's making a big mistake." Seagal's voice came again, quiet but cold. "You've had your fun, son. Let go of the jacket and walk away." The way he said it, slow even, absolute, sent chills through half the people there. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. Jake sneered. "Or what, you'll meditate me to death?" A few nervous chuckles, but they died fast. Nobody liked the way Steven's eyes suddenly narrowed. The silence that followed was heavy, the kind that happens right before a lightning strike. Everyone was watching. No music, no laughter. Just the sound of the ceiling fan and the weight of 100 bad decisions pressing down on Jake's shoulders. Jake pulled harder, jerking Steven toward him. That was the moment. The line was crossed. Every instinct in the room screamed that Jake had just started something he couldn't finish. And Steven, still calm, still breathing slow, whispered something only Jake could hear. "You picked the wrong jacket." Have you ever seen someone pick a fight with the wrong person? Tell us in the comments. And before we continue, drop your country and city below. We love seeing where everyone's watching from. The bar had gone so quiet that you could hear the ice melting in a glass somewhere near the back. Jake Ironjaw Miller still had his hand clamped on Steven Seagal's jacket, but now that grip didn't feel so confident anymore. Something about Steven's stillness unnerved him. It wasn't the silence of fear, it was the silence of certainty. Like a man who'd already seen the outcome long before it happened. Jake leaned closer, trying to mask his unease with bravado. "You got something to say, old man? Spit it out before I—" Steven's eyes lifted, cutting through him like the edge of a blade. "Son," he said slowly, his voice deep and calm. "If you knew who you were touching, you'd have let go a long time ago." A few people chuckled nervously, but most stayed frozen. That voice wasn't angry, it was warning him. Jake laughed anyway, forcing the sound out through clenched teeth. "Oh yeah? Who am I touching, huh? Some washed-up action hero?" Steven didn't answer. He just looked at Jake's hand on his jacket, then back into his eyes. That look alone made Jake's laughter falter. From the corner, an older biker whispered to his buddy, "That's him, man. That's really Steven Seagal." His friend frowned. "The movie guy?" "The Aikido master," the older one replied quietly. "You don't want to mess with him." Jake heard the whispers and rolled his eyes. "Yeah, right. Movies ain't real life. Let's see if he moves like that for real." He gave the jacket another tug. That was when the bartender finally spoke up. "Jake, stop." His voice cracked slightly. "I'm serious, man. Don't do it." Jake turned, smirking. "What, you scared he's gonna do a stunt roll on me?" Steven's expression didn't change, but the tension in the air got heavier, like the air before thunder. His voice came again, low and deliberate. "I told you once. Let go." Jake hesitated for half a second too long, because at that moment Steven's stance shifted just an inch, barely noticeable. His feet adjusted, his shoulders aligned, and anyone who'd ever trained in martial arts knew exactly what that meant. The bartender slowly backed away. One of the women at the bar whispered, "Oh my God, he's about to do something." Jake, still trying to act brave, barked, "Don't play games with me, old man." But there was a tremor in his voice now. Steven exhaled once calmly. His words came out soft, almost like advice. "Anger clouds your judgment. You should learn to see before you swing." That line made Jake snap. He released the jacket, but only to shove Steven square in the chest. "You talk too much," he shouted. The push barely moved Steven. He didn't stumble, didn't flinch. He just straightened the fold of his jacket like nothing happened. That's when he spoke again, barely above a whisper. "You don't want to do this." The calmness of that voice chilled everyone. It wasn't a threat. It was pity. Jake raised his fist, ready to swing. His buddies cheered him on, loud, drunk, and completely unaware of what was about to happen. In that exact heartbeat, the bartender muttered, "He's done." Steven's right hand rose, slow, smooth, effortless. His fingers barely brushed Jake's wrist as he turned. Then, in one graceful motion, he redirected Jake's entire arm and stepped aside. There was a dull thud. Jake was suddenly bent over the bar, his wrist twisted backward, his face frozen in disbelief. The movement had been so fast, so clean, that half the room didn't even realize what happened. Steven held him there, not hurting him, just controlling him, calmly, effortlessly. The entire bar stared, jaws dropped. "Now," Steven said quietly, his hand still steady on Jake's wrist. "We can either end this like men, or like fools." Jake grunted in pain, but he didn't fight. The difference between movie fights and reality had just become crystal clear. Steven released him, stepping back slowly. "Walk away." Jake staggered, clutching his wrist, red-faced but humbled. His friends stood frozen, and none of them dared move. For the first time that night, Jake didn't have anything to say. The silence that followed was deafening, thick with awe, disbelief, and a little fear. Someone near the jukebox finally muttered, "Holy hell, that was real." The bartender exhaled, shaking his head. "Told you, that man doesn't need to talk tough. He is tough." Steven turned back to his drink, as calm as when he walked in. Not a drop of his tea had spilled. He looked over his shoulder once more, speaking softly. Not to Jake, but to everyone watching. "Strength isn't about hurting people. It's about knowing when not to." He took one sip of tea and the bar stayed completely silent. If you were in Steven's place, would you walk away or teach the guy a lesson like this? Type your answer in the comments. And if you respect calm power over aggression, hit the follow button for more stories like this one. For a few long seconds, nobody moved. Jake stood there, rubbing his wrist, breathing heavy, still trying to understand what had just happened. The man he'd called an old actor had turned his strength into nothing with a single gentle motion. But pride dies hard, especially when it's been fed by alcohol and an audience. Jake straightened up, trying to save face. "You think that makes you tough, huh?" he barked, shaking off the pain. "You just got lucky." Steven Seagal turned his head slightly, his calm gaze never leaving Jake. "Luck," he said quietly, "is for men who don't know what they're doing." A few of the onlookers couldn't help it, and they laughed. Not mockingly, but in disbelief. The kind of laugh people make when something unbelievable just happened in front of them. Jake's pride flared red hot. He roared and charged forward, swinging a wide, heavy punch, the kind that would have dropped a normal man cold. But Steven wasn't normal. Without even blinking, he shifted his weight. His hand rose like a shadow. There was a blur, a twist of motion so smooth it looked almost unreal. And in a heartbeat, Jake's arm was redirected, his momentum reversed. The next sound was a crack, not bone, but the echo of Jake hitting the wooden floor flat on his back. The entire bar gasped. Jake groaned, staring up at the ceiling, stunned. He hadn't even seen it happen. Steven exhaled once, brushing off his jacket. His voice remained calm, almost casual. "You move too hard," he said. "That's why you fall so easy." The bartender froze mid-motion, his mouth half open. One of Jake's biker buddies whispered, "Did you even see him move?" "No," another muttered. "He was just there, then bam." Steven didn't gloat. He didn't even look proud. He simply looked disappointed. Jake rolled to his side, struggling to stand. His pride was broken, but his temper wasn't. He lunged again, slower this time, more desperate than dangerous. Steven stepped aside like a ghost drifting past a storm. With the lightest motion, he tapped Jake's shoulder, redirecting his weight. Jake stumbled forward, caught himself on a chair, and then the chair flipped backward with him still holding onto it. Another thud. Another stunned silence. At this point, even Jake's friends didn't move. They just watched, eyes wide, jaws slack. Steven's voice came again, quiet as ever. "You done yet?" Jake looked up, panting, sweat running down his temple. "What the hell are you?" he muttered. Steven's answer was simple. Just a man who learned how not to fight. The bartender blinked, whispering, "That's Steven Seagal, man. He's the real deal." And that's when it hit the rest of the bar. The way he moved. The way he spoke. The stillness before every motion. The effortless precision. This wasn't acting. This was years, decades out of mastery. A biker in the back finally said what everyone was thinking. Holy crap. That's really him. The name rippled through the crowd. Steven Seagal. Someone grabbed their phone and started recording. The energy in the room flipped. Suddenly, people weren't watching a fight anymore. They were witnessing a legend in real life. Jake sat up slowly, realization dawning on his face. His pride drained away, replaced by something new. Respect. Steven took a slow sip of his tea, still perfectly calm. "Next time," he said gently, "pick your battles with your mind, not your ego." Jake nodded, rubbing his arm. Yeah, I get that now." The tension in the air began to dissolve. The jukebox started playing again. Someone must have hit the button without even realizing. The normal sounds of the bar crept back, but the mood was different now. Everyone was talking quietly, like they'd just seen something sacred. Steven reached into his pocket, pulled out a few bills and placed them on the counter. "For the tea," he said to the bartender. The bartender hesitated, still half shocked. It's on the house, Mr. Seagal." Steven gave a small nod. "Then pay it forward to someone who needs it." He turned to leave, but before stepping outside, he looked back once more, not with arrogance, but calm authority. He said softly, "Peace is power. Don't forget that." Then he walked out into the night, the sound of his boots fading into the wind. Inside, no one spoke for a few seconds. Then Jake, still sitting on the floor, looked at his friends and said, almost laughing, "Remind me never to touch another man's jacket again." The bar erupted in nervous laughter and applause. Not mockery, admiration. Everyone knew they'd just witnessed something they'd tell for years. The night a cocky biker grabbed Steven Seagal's jacket and learned what real control looked like. Have you ever seen someone win a fight without throwing a single punch? Tell us in the comments. And if you respect calm confidence like Steven Seagal's, type real strength below. The door swung shut behind Steven Seagal, leaving a silence so thick it felt like the whole bar had forgotten how to breathe. Jake sat there for a few seconds, still rubbing his wrist, his face a mix of pain, shock, and something deeper. Shame. No one said a word. The sound of the jukebox hummed faintly in the background, playing some slow blues tune that matched the strange mood in the room. Finally, Jake broke the silence. That really was him, wasn't it?" The bartender nodded slowly, still cleaning the same glass he'd been holding for the last 5 minutes. "Oh, it was him all right. And you're damn lucky he's who he is, cause anyone else you'd be face down on that floor for real." Jake gave a weak laugh, but there wasn't any humor in it. "Man, I thought he was just some old dude. Didn't mean no harm." One of his friends muttered, "Yeah, but you grabbed Steven Seagal, bro. Like Steven freaking Seagal." The realization hit Jake all at once. His tough guy mask cracked. "I made a fool of myself," he said quietly. "In front of everyone." The bartender leaned on the counter, sighing. "Nah, you made a mistake. The fool part's only if you don't learn from it." Jake nodded, looking down at his hands. His knuckles were red, not from landing punches, but from hitting the floor. Outside, the night air was cool and still. Steven Seagal hadn't gone far. He stood by his motorcycle, adjusting his gloves, calm as ever. The streetlight above him flickered softly, casting long shadows on the pavement. Jake hesitated before stepping outside. He didn't know what to say, or even if he should say anything. But something pulled him forward. Steven turned slightly, sensing his presence before Jake even spoke. He didn't look angry. "Just aware, you all right?" he asked simply. Jake nodded awkwardly. Yeah, I think so." "Look, man, I'm sorry. I didn't know." Steven looked at him, not judging, just studying. "You didn't know who I was?" he asked. Jake shook his head. "No, and I guess that's the problem. I saw a guy sitting quiet, drinking tea, not looking tough, and I thought that meant I could push him around." Steven gave a faint smile, the kind that holds a lifetime of lessons. "Most people think loud means strong," he said. "It's usually the opposite." Jake looked down, embarrassed. "You could have hurt me bad in there. Why didn't you?" Steven took a slow breath. "Because fighting's not about hurting people. It's about ending things before they start. Power isn't in the punch. It's in the choice not to throw it. Jake nodded, the weight of those words sinking in. Guess I've been getting that wrong my whole life. Steven adjusted his jacket. We all do at some point. But you learn, or you don't. The difference between a man and a boy is how he handles being humbled. That line hit Jake harder than any punch could have. He swallowed, his pride now replaced by something closer to respect. You ever lose control like that? He asked quietly. Steven's eyes softened. Once, he said. Long time ago. I learned that anger is easy, discipline takes years. There was silence for a moment. Just the soft sound of the wind passing between them. Jake finally extended his hand. For what it's worth, thanks. For not embarrassing me worse than I deserved. Steven looked at the hand for a second, then shook it firmly. You embarrassed yourself enough to learn something. That's the best kind, Jake chuckled. The first genuine laugh of the night. You really are like in the movies, huh? All wisdom and no nonsense, Steven smiled faintly. Movies show a fraction of the truth. The rest is what people never see, the quiet. Jake nodded, glancing back toward the bar. I think those guys in there are still frozen. Steven chuckled under his breath. Maybe that's a good thing. Let them think before they act next time. Jake looked up at him, thoughtful. You know, I got a kid. Always tells me not to get into fights. Maybe I should start listening. Steven placed a hand on his shoulder, his tone calm but meaningful. Start by showing him how a man apologizes. Then show him how one walks away. Jake nodded slowly, that lesson carving itself deep into his mind. Steven put on his sunglasses, even though it was night, and started his motorcycle. The engine purred like thunder in a distant storm. Before he rode off, he said one last thing. You're not weak for backing down. Jake, you're weak for not knowing when to. Then he revved the bike and pulled out onto the road, disappearing into the darkness like a shadow swallowed by the night. Jake stood there for a long time, staring after him. The streetlight flickered once more. Inside, his friends peeked through the window, still whispering, still amazed. But Jake didn't go back in right away. He just stood there, breathing deeply, realizing that for the first time in years, maybe ever, he actually felt small, in a good way. Because that night, he hadn't just met Steven Seagal. He'd met respect. Do you think Jake deserved what happened, or did Steven go easy on him? Tell us in the comments below. And if you believe real strength is staying calm when others lose control, type respect in the comments. By the next morning, the story had already started spreading, though nobody at the bar knew just how far it would go. It began with one short video. A 2-minute clip filmed from a shaky phone camera captioned, "Biker grabs random guy's jacket. Turns out it's Steven Seagal." The video showed the whole thing. Jake towering over Seagal, the arrogant smirk, the shove. And then the blur. The moment Steven's hand moved, the camera caught it just enough to show Jake hitting the ground like gravity itself had decided to teach him a lesson. People online couldn't believe it was real. Wait, that's actually him. One commenter wrote, "Bro didn't even break a sweat," another said. "He didn't fight. He educated the dude." Within hours, the clip hit 10 million views. By noon, it was everywhere. TikTok, Instagram, YouTube Shorts, even news outlets. Steven Seagal silences aggressive biker with one move. The headline alone pulled millions of clicks. Inside the bar, business was suddenly booming. Reporters showed up asking for interviews. People wanted to see the spot where it happened. The bartender, who'd tried to stay out of the chaos, found himself repeating the same line to every camera crew. Man didn't even raise his voice. That's what scared everyone. He was calm like a storm that already knows it's gonna win. Jake tried to avoid the spotlight, but there was no hiding. He woke up to hundreds of messages, DMs, and tags. Some mocked him. Others called him brave for facing Seagal at all. At first, he didn't know how to handle it. Shame burned deep. But so did reflection. That evening, he returned to the bar, this time alone. The bartender looked up and gave him a half smile. "Didn't think I'd see you again so soon," Jake shrugged. "Had to face it, I guess." The bartender poured him a glass of water, not beer. "You holding up all right?" Jake took a sip and nodded. "Funny thing. I've been watching that video all day. Every time I see him move, I realize I was the loudest man in the room. And the weakest." The bartender smirked. Welcome to the club. We all learned something that night. As they talked, a news clip played on the TV above the bar. A reporter spoke over footage of Steven walking to his car, surrounded by cameras. When asked about the incident, Seagal simply said, "Violence is what happens when wisdom leaves the room." Jake stared at the screen. "He said that?" "Yeah," the bartender replied, and he meant it. The comments online mirrored that sentiment. The world wasn't cheering for the takedown. They were cheering for the control. One top comment read, "That's not a man who fights. That's a man who understands." Jake exhaled slowly. "Guess I needed that understanding too." The bartender nodded. "Then you got something out of it most people never will." Jake looked thoughtful. "You know what's crazy? My son saw the video. He texted me, said he was proud of me for apologizing. See?" The bartender said. "That's what matters. You're not the villain in that story anymore. You're the student." Jake smiled faintly, shaking his head. "Yeah, a real expensive lesson, though. Pride's always the costliest thing." The bartender chuckled. "Cheaper than a broken jaw, though." They both laughed, quietly, genuinely. Meanwhile, halfway across the city, Steven sat in a small cafe. Not a fancy restaurant, not a studio. Just a quiet place where he could drink tea in peace. The owner recognized him but didn't bother him. He watched the news on a small TV behind the counter, his own face filling the screen. Reporters were spinning the story in every direction. Seagal's calm response goes viral. Actor turns real-life confrontation into life lesson. Master of control. Steven Seagal teaches respect the hard way. Steven just smiled faintly. He didn't care about the fame. He cared that people were talking about respect, even if it took a viral video to make them do it. A young man approached shyly. Excuse me, sir," he said. "I just wanted to say about that video. You changed how I think about fighting. I've been doing martial arts for years, but I never understood the calm part till now." Steven looked up at him, eyes steady. "Calm is the highest form of strength," he said softly. "When you can end something without starting it, that's mastery." The young man nodded, visibly inspired. "Thank you, sir." Steven gave a small bow of acknowledgement before returning to his tea. Back at the bar, Jake scrolled through comments one last time. Among all the jokes and memes, one caught his eye. It was a quote image of Seagal from the interview with bold white text over it. "A man who controls his hands is strong. A man who controls his heart is stronger." Jake read it twice, then smiled. He put his phone down, looked around the bar, and said to the bartender, "You know what? I think I'll stick to being calm from now on." The bartender grinned. "Good plan. You've already gone viral once, don't need a sequel." Jake laughed. And this time, it was real. Outside, rain began to fall lightly on the pavement. Soft, rhythmic, peaceful, somewhere out there. Steven Seagal rode through the city streets, his silhouette fading into the mist. He didn't need cameras, applause, or headlines. The world could keep its noise, because a man like him didn't chase power. He was power, quiet, steady, and unforgettable. Would you have handled it like Steven did, calm and controlled, or would you have fought back? If you think emotional control is the real strength, type calm power in the comments. By the end of the week, the clip wasn't just viral. It had become a movement. Across social media, millions were sharing it with captions like, "This is how real men handle disrespect. Control anger. Steven Seagal just schooled an entire generation." Everywhere you looked, people were quoting him, "Power isn't in the punch. It's in the choice not to throw it." The hashtag #calm is power hit the #1 spot on every platform. Teachers played the clip in classrooms. Coaches used it in locker rooms. Even police training seminars discussed it as an example of de-escalation mastery. It was more than a viral video now. It was a reminder. Meanwhile, Jake was living through the strangest redemption arc of his life. Instead of hiding from the attention, he started speaking about what happened. Not as a victim, but as someone who learned the hard way. He filmed a short video sitting at his kitchen table looking straight into the camera. "Yeah, that was me," he began. "I was the guy who grabbed Steven Seagal's jacket. Thought I was proving I was tough. Turns out the toughest man in the room didn't need to prove anything." He paused for a moment, his expression honest. "I learned something that night. Control doesn't mean weakness. It means wisdom. And if you're lucky enough to meet someone like that, You walk away smarter, not angrier. He posted it quietly. No hashtags, no music, just the truth. By the next morning, his video had 1 million views. People respected him for owning it. Comments flooded in. Man enough to admit he was wrong, that's real growth. Jake, your apology made me rethink how I act when I'm angry. The internet, for once, wasn't tearing someone down. It was lifting him up. Somewhere far away, Steven Seagal saw Jake's video. He smiled, not the smug kind, but the satisfied kind. The kind that said, lesson learned. He was sitting on a wooden bench by the sea, sipping tea, watching the waves crash softly against the shore. A journalist approached him, politely, hesitantly. "Mr. Seagal, the world's calling you a hero again," she said. "Do you have anything you'd like to say about the viral video?" Steven looked out at the horizon for a long moment before answering. His voice was calm, deep, deliberate. "People don't need more heroes," he said. "They need more peace. If that moment helped even one person choose calm over chaos, then that's enough for me." The journalist nodded but pressed once more. "And the man from the video, Jake, what would you say to him?" Steven smiled faintly. "I'd tell him he's already done the hardest thing a man can do. He changed." That quote spread like wildfire. Within hours, it was on posters, t-shirts, motivational pages, and even classroom walls. The hardest thing a man can do is change. Steven Seagal. Few weeks later, Jake walked into that same bar again. No cameras, no crowd, just him and the bartender. The bartender grinned. "You know this place is famous now, right?" Jake chuckled. "Yeah, but fame's overrated. Respect's better." He ordered a tea, not a beer, and raised the cup. "To calm power," he said. The bartender lifted his glass back. "To learning the hard way," they clinked. Both smiling, the jukebox started playing again. A soft blues tune that sounded almost like the night it all happened. Outside, rain misted over the streets, the lights reflecting off puddles like liquid gold. Somewhere out there, Steven Seagal was still traveling, quiet, steady, leaving lessons behind him wherever he went. And for everyone who watched that video, everyone who'd ever felt anger boiling inside them, that moment stayed burned in memory. The way Seagal didn't fight, didn't shout, didn't need to. He simply stood there, calm, centered, unshakable. And that image became a message that outlived the moment itself. True power isn't in domination. It's in discipline. And sometimes the strongest move is no move at all. If you believe real power comes from control, not chaos, type respect in the comments. And don't forget to follow for more true stories of humility, strength, and redemption.